Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Friday, the 5th of December. You're tuned in to our mid-morning newscast here on ARIRANG TV. Thanks for joining us on this extremely cold day here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. The Korean government will convene a special meeting today to work out ways to counter the growing problem of illegal Chinese fishing in Korea's exclusive economic zone. Addressing racial tensions in the United States following a number of controversial jury verdicts, President Barack Obama says too many Americans feel there's a deep unfairness about the way laws are enforced in the country. Plus, Samsung Electronics asks an appeal court in the United States to overturn the $930 million in damages it was told to pay Apple for patent infringement. The Korean company says the amount is excessive and unwarranted. But our top story this morning, Korea is seeking out ways to take bolder action against illegal Chinese fishing in Korean waters. The ruling Saenuri Party and officials from relevant government ministries will convene today to discuss ways to improve countermeasures. An official at the National Assembly says the government has not done enough to protect the domestic fishing industry. Korean fishermen have been calling on the government to strengthen its monitoring and crack down as Chinese fishing boats have been illegally entering Korea's so-called exclusive economic zone in larger and larger numbers in recent years. They also want the authorities to widen the scope of their patrols all the way up and down the Korean coastline. Hundreds of Chinese fishermen are arrested each and every year for illegally fishing in Korean waters, and they often react extremely violently when Coast Guard officers approach their vessels. The bodies of 8 more victims in the sinking of a Korean vessel off Russia's far eastern coast were recovered on Thursday. This brings the confirmed death toll to 20. 33 are still missing. According to the vessel's owner, the boat appeared to have lost balance after water flooded in and blocked one of the boat's drains. As search and rescue operations continue in a very difficult part of the ocean up there in the north, Korea says it's going to dispatch 2 patrol planes and also a patrol ship to the site of the sinking. President Park Geun-hye has said that the reunification of the 2 Koreas would be a bonanza for the Korean peninsula, and while everyone in South Korea might not have such strong convictions as the president herself, especially when you bear in mind the mind-boggling costs and other social and economic issues that could be attached to this reunification, 7 out of 10 South Koreans do support the idea of a unified Korea. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
Unification of the 2 Koreas would be a bonanza. Words spoken by the South Korean president. But what do the average South Koreans think? Believe it or not, 7 in 10 people say we need unification. This according to a survey by the Seoul-based Korea Institute for National Unification on 1,000 people nationwide. Then why do they think unification is needed? Nearly 40% of respondents said it was because North and South Koreans belong to the same race. Eliminating the threat of war came in second, followed by reuniting families separated by the Korean War and becoming an advanced nation. While not many South Koreans see unification as a benefit to themselves as an individual, they believe that it would be a boon for the country as a whole. If and when the 2 Koreas do become one, the respondents said their top agenda should be working to achieve greater economic growth. Experts say the GDP of a unified Korea could reach $70,000 by 2050, the second highest among G20 nations. While the report shows public sentiment is largely behind unification, many South Koreans were still apprehensive when it came to the idea of moving to the north for work or marriage, indicating there is still a way to go before they feel totally comfortable about their northern neighbors. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Now, South Korea has expressed its willingness to return to the long-stalled 6-party talks that are aimed at eventually denuclearizing North Korea. Seoul's chief nuclear envoy says that if Pyongyang is sincere and wants to talk about constructive stuff, South Korea is ready to retake its seat at the proceedings. Our Hwang Sang-hee reports.
South Korea is ready to return to the six-party nuclear talks. All North Korea has to do is show that it's serious about giving up its nuclear weapons. Following talks with its Russian counterpart in Moscow on Wednesday, South Korea's chief nuclear envoy Hwang Jung-guk said the five parties, including Russia and China, agree on the need for some preconditions for the multilateral dialogue. That, however, doesn't mean the North must take specific steps before returning to the negotiating table. Hwang said that beginning the talks without North Korea showing a sincere attitude about denuclearization would be meaningless. He added Pyongyang must show a willingness to engage in a constructive dialogue. The multilateral denuclearization talks involving the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia haven't been held since late 2008. But a recent flurry of diplomatic activity among the six parties has fueled hopes of getting the ball rolling again. Washington's new special representative for North Korea policy, Sung Kim, will meet with Hwang in Seoul on Friday as part of a three-nation trip that also takes him to Japan and China. This while North Korean officials and American security experts are reportedly arranging a meeting in Singapore next month. Diplomatic sources say North Korea's chief nuclear negotiator Lee Yong-ho and former U.S. nuclear envoy Stephen Bosworth are among the likely attendees. Hwang Sang-hee, ARIRANG News.
Now, South Korea is going to mark a very solemn anniversary next March, the 5th anniversary, in fact, of the fatal sinking of the Cheonan warship, in which more than 40 South Korean sailors lost their lives. This ship was torpedoed by North Korea, and it's been recently moved to a park where it's hoped it can be displayed for educational purposes. Our Choi Yoo-sun reports.
Inside a park at the South Korean Navy 2nd Fleet headquarters south of Seoul now stands what remains of the Cheonan warship, which was torpedoed by North Korea nearly 5 years ago. A $6 million project has placed the 1,200-ton vessel here from a nearby dock to show the very appearance of the Cheonan, cut into two pieces after the attack on March 26, 2010, which claimed the lives of 46 South Korean sailors. Visitors can get a wider view of the area atop a 4-story high observatory and listen to the details of the tragedy before paying tribute to the sailors in front of a monument.
The exhibition will become a sign of protecting our country, where a will for a victorious fight will be imprinted in the officers, and people will be reminded about the value of security.
In a bid to turn the painful memory into an opportunity to educate people about security, officials plan to build an additional memorial hall next year.
I was heartbroken when we had to say goodbye to our children, but I'm thankful that the government has made efforts not to forget them.
Some 830,000 Koreans and foreigners have visited the Cheonan since it was displayed at the fleet's dock soon after the attack. Now the story of the ill-fated vessel can be told to more visitors at its new home. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News.
Demonstrations have been spreading across the United States 1 day after a grand jury in New York City returned with a decision not to press charges against a white police officer who killed an unarmed black man in what is called a chokehold. For more on this story, we connect to Eunice Kim at the News Center. Now, Eunice, first, we must stress that these protests have been mostly peaceful, and some good could end up coming of this awful situation, as plans are already in place to retrain New York City's police force.
We're of course talking about the NYPD, Mark, and there aren't a lot of details yet on the program, but New York's Mayor Bill de Blasio iterated on Thursday that policing has to change. He said he understood the anger and frustration exploding onto the streets.
People need to know that black lives and brown lives matter as much as white lives. It's what we still have to aspire to.
Police Commissioner William J. Bratton outlined some of the detail. He said a 3-day program starting this month will be participated by some 22,000 officers, during which the periodic firearms training will be coupled with a teaching on street tactics, such as presenting a non-judgmental posture. Earlier, President Barack Obama from Washington said too many Americans feel deep unfairness when it comes to the gap between professed ideals and how laws are applied on a day-to-day basis. But a New York City police union told reporters 29-year-old officer Daniel Pataleo had acted properly in restraining Eric Garner on July 17th. Officer Pantaleo had testified he meant no harm when putting Garner, who had health conditions, in a chokehold.
Well, Eunice, this case has definitely thrown a lot more fuel onto the anger of protesters who think the US legal system is stacked against black people, but it's good to see that the protests thus far have been peaceful. Now, turning our attention to some other developments on the case of these popping airbags we keep hearing about. We're talking about the airbags made by a Japanese company, Takata Corporation, and this has led to the recall of 14 million vehicles worldwide. What's the latest on this?
Sure, 14 million vehicles in 10 different brands, including BMW, Ford, and Honda. 8 million of those cars in the U.S. The exploding driver's side airbags have been attributed to 5 deaths and 139 injuries so far. The latest is that Toyota Motor Corporation has said it will call back 190,000 more cars to replace potentially defective airbags, though maker Takata has so far resisted a nationwide recall called by a U.S. safety agency. Following what it called an unprecedented crisis, Japan's regulator said it may need to change its recall system for an improved response. A Japanese ministry official said that if America's regional recall was expanded nationwide, he would expect automakers in Japan to take similar action as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the updates, Eunice, and we'll see you back here again at noon, Korea time.
See you then.
Said that a team of South Korea.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers 15 billion. Now, Samsung Electronics is asking an appeals court in the United States to throw out an order that it pay Apple $930 million for infringing on iPhone patents when it made its Galaxy range of smart devices. Making the Korean company's case at a U.S. district court in California, Samsung's lawyer said the lower court was wrong to decide Apple's design patents were infringed upon because the Samsung devices do not carry an Apple logo, do not have a home button, and have speaker slots in different places than iPhones. The lawyer argued the award of such huge damages to Apple was like awarding an entire profits on a car just because it infringed another automaker's cup holder. Apple's lawyer said the $930 million award was fair. Reports say the 3 judges did not indicate when they would rule. Starting in the new year, Swedish furniture company Ikea will stop selling a world map which refers to the body of water between Korea and Japan only by the Japanese name. Ahead of the opening of its first store in Korea this month, Ikea says it's decided to leave the map off its product lineup. The map, which caused an intense stir here in Korea, refers to the sea as Sea of Japan, as you can see on the screen there, but it does not use the Korean name East Sea, explaining the map was not intended to be used as an educational tool. The company apologized for upsetting its Korean customers and employees. Now, while the overall Korean economy continues on the path to a moderate recovery, growth in income is unfortunately not keeping pace with that. The figure did rise in the third quarter, but did so at its slowest rate in well over 2 years. Hwang Jie reports.
Korea has posted its slowest growth in income in 2.5 years. The Bank of Korea says the national income edged up 0.3% in real terms in the third quarter from the previous one, the lowest expansion since the first quarter of 2012. The central bank attributes the slower growth to worsening trade conditions, with export prices falling faster than import prices.
Prices of outbound shipments dropped, while prices of IT products, which are one of Korea's major export items, fell.
But experts say next quarter income figures could expand at a faster pace than the third quarter due to falling global oil prices.
Oil prices dropped a lot in the fourth quarter, so trade conditions are likely to improve in the October to December period.
Overall economic activities remain on a recovery track as the country's gross domestic product grew 0.9% in the July to September period from the previous quarter. The third quarter figure matches an estimate made in late October and stands similar to the roughly 1% growth posted a year earlier. It also marks an improvement from 0.5% growth in the second quarter. From a year earlier, however, the Korean economy grew 3.2% last quarter, slowing from 3.5% growth in the second quarter. Key indicators also point to a still sluggish economy, with facility investments down 0.5% on quarter and exports falling more than 2% in the third quarter from a quarter earlier. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
So, as was just touched upon there in that report, Korea does have a very heavy dependence on exports. So, the government has long stressed the importance of foreign direct investment into Korea. So, free economic zones have been built and are dotted around the country to try and entice foreign companies to lay down some roots here in the country. But Korea is having to raise its game now because there is up-and-coming competition in the region. Our Song Ji-son reports.
To attract more foreign direct investment, Korea has established 8 free economic zones over the past dozen years, with their total area amounting to 330 square kilometers, or half the size of Singapore. This one in Incheon was the first to be set up in 2003 and is the biggest of the 8. Foreign investors can receive tax exemptions and incentives when setting up their businesses in these free economic zones. BMW is one of many enjoying the benefits since building its first driving center in Asia at Incheon.
It took years to choose the location through multiple feasibility tests, and we are fully satisfied with our decision. It's close to the capital and the metropolitan area. It's close to the airport, which enables us to provide maintenance service when our clients fly out.
Korea seeks to become the center of East Asia in terms of investment by attracting more FDI in the 8 free economic zones. But further deregulation is needed to fight rising competition within the region, as China and Taiwan also launched similar free trade zones last year.
FDI coming into Korea, if you go back to 2003, it's gone up by about a factor of 3. So it's good progress, roughly on a par with other countries in Asia, but good, solid progress. The competition is there, though. I mean, I think that's key. Korea is not alone in doing this.
The researcher also points out that inefficiencies in labor and financial markets are slowing things down, while Korea's infrastructure and high level of education stand out as advantages compared to its global competitors. Song Ji-son, Arirang News.
Now, a climate warning has been issued. The steady warming of the tropical Pacific Ocean over the past 2 months has resulted in ocean surface temperatures reaching weak El Niño levels. In a news release Thursday, the World Meteorological Organization said there's a 70% chance a weak El Niño event will become established early next year. Now, El Niño, if you don't know, is a warming of the Pacific around the equator that can drive weather changes around the entire world. And while the El Niño is expected to be weak, if it happens at all, the weather organizations warned that it's unusual and very alarming that vast areas of the ocean surface have shown high temperatures this year, including in the normally cooler northern hemisphere. On the sidelines of the UN climate talks this week, the World Meteorological Organization said 2014 is on track to be one of the hottest years on record, citing the numerous droughts and floods reported around the globe.
And TGI Friday, everyone, as we kick things off with Formula One racing, as it was announced that the Korean Grand Prix will return in the 2015 F1 calendar, but it is still to be confirmed. Now, with the Korean Grand Prix being left off the schedule this past season due to financial problems, the latest provisional schedule for the 2015 season has Korean Grand Prix returning once again. However, the latest change is still marked at to be confirmed, as it is unsure whether the race will return to Yeongnam or if it will be the Seoul street circuit idea that is being pushed for by former race promoter Jo Chung. Meanwhile, if the race does return to Korea, it's scheduled for May 3rd instead of the usual October dates. And now shifting over to golf, where the annual Korea-Japan Women's Golf Tournament is set to take place this weekend, as golf stars from both nations are set to compete in a two-day tournament starting on Sunday. Now, with the tournament taking place for the 12th time, Korea has a winning record against Japan with 6 wins, 2 draws, and 3 losses so far, as some of the biggest names in the LPGA, KLPGA, and the JLPGA are set to compete in Japan. Now, some of the names include world number 1 Park In-bi, Lee So-yeon, Kim Hyo-ju, and Shin Ji-ae, who has been dominating over in the JLPGA. And now moving over to football this time, and the KFA's technical conference was kicked off on Thursday. Now, highlighting the conference was the national team head coach Uli Stilicke, who held his first presentation, stressing the importance of flexibility. Now, the hour-long lecture, which was spoken in Spanish, focused mainly on head coaches learning to be flexible on the bench and learning to change the strategy during the match. The 60-year-old argued that coaches shouldn't be held back by what he called SOS, as in system, organization, and scheme. Now, Stilicke, who showed such flexibility in his coaching, is 2-2 so far in the 4 matches he's coached with the Korean national team. And finishing things off, but staying with the KFA's technical conference, a couple of technical committee members had their presentation on the reasons for why Korea failed to advance in the 2014 Brazil World Cup, and they came up with 2 reasons. Now, one of the reasons pointed out by Anik Soo, a member of the technical committee, was the lack of movement from the players. He stated that the players moved less than the opposing teams in all 3 group stage matches, adding that one of Germany's reasons for success was their players moving around far more than their opponents. Meanwhile, Chung Tae-seok cited lack of efficiency as another reason for why the national team did poorly in Brazil. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Cold wave came over and swept the whole country this morning. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. Currently, cold wave alert have been issued over in Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do and Chungcheongbuk-do provinces, where there is just strong winds blowing here in Seoul. And as you can see that it's much colder today than yesterday just by looking at the temperatures. Now, as you are looking at the current temperature, which stands at minus 9.8 degrees here in the capital. However, the wind chill is actually around minus 14 degrees, which is a lot colder than it seems. So make sure to bundle up when you are heading outside today. And looking above the peninsula, you can see it's pretty much clear and we can expect sunny skies all day. And to our readings for today, Seoul will peak to minus 3 degrees this afternoon, while the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will top to 2 and 5 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju-wan looks up to 6, while Dokdo hits over 1, while Anggeong drops down low at minus 10 degrees. Well, that's all for now. Michelle Park now. Here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now. Be sure to bundle up if you head outside on this bitterly cold day here in Korea. We'll be back with our next newscast at noon Korea time. Until then, goodbye.